So tonight we'll talk about Pesach. This is a topic that we've spoken about in the past, but there's always something new, more elaboration on what the significance of this holiday is. Even though many of us, of course, Baruch Hashem, celebrate it, we have the Seder, we read from the Haggadah, but a lot of the messages perhaps are not communicated. Pesach being the first holiday of the year, right? Pesach, Shavuot, then Sukkot, is really perhaps the one that contains the most messages. Being that it's the first, it is a time that Am Yisrael leaves Egypt and becomes a nation. You can imagine that there is a lot of information that is being communicated to us during this one night or two nights in Chutz La'aretz. It's important to us to understand what these messages are, because to have a truly wonderful Pesach kasher does not only mean eating kosher food, kosher for Passover, it means really enjoying it as the Torah intended for us to enjoy. Not only to have a good time, not only to sit around the table with our families, not only to celebrate our exodus from Egypt, but also to understand what it is that the Torah wants of us, that it's so important for us to continue to celebrate this Chag every single year for so many years. Chag Pesach is also known as Chag HaCherut. It is the holiday of freedom. That is when the Jewish nation becomes free from slavery, from physical bondage. But many of us perhaps think that freedom just means to be free, to be able to do whatever you want, not to have to work for someone else. Everybody has a different idea of what freedom is. And freedom is obviously something very important to us. This country, the United States of America, was founded on freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right? Freedom of speech, the freedom to gather, to express yourself however you wish. But you're not exactly free to do anything you want. This is still a country where there is law and order, supposedly, right? So what exactly is freedom then? Is freedom only limited to certain things? Or is freedom like the hippies? Don't tell me what to do. I'd like to do whatever I want. Hefkerut. But anyone who has some common sense will agree that that is not what freedom really is. Freedom does not mean hefkerut, to be able to do anything one wishes. So what is freedom? How do we define freedom? Well, before we define freedom, we must understand that every human being very much values this. Every human being feels a constant desire to be free, to be independent. He would rather not have to depend on others, right? But there are some who are freer than others. There are those who are less dependent on others. And it all depends on the circumstances that they're in. So, generally speaking, if you ask somebody what he would say about freedom, or what he would like to be, or how he would explain freedom, you're going to come up with different definitions depending on what it is that he is looking for, what it is that he wants. We are more concerned with what true freedom is. True freedom is one who is completely liberated from his mazal. Because mazal is something that limits us, as we will see B'ezrat Hashem after Pesach. Mazalot, depending on what your mazal is a form of limitation. And no matter how free you are and how much money you have, you're not entirely free, because your mazal does not free you. It dictates what kind of a life you're going to have. The same thing, the circumstances in the world limit us. We have no control over war that is happening in this country or in that country, and it limits us. We cannot just do what we want. It limits us even at the gas station, where you have to pay whatever the price is for gas. I mean, you have no say in the matter. I used mazal as an example because mazal is one of those areas that limit us, that most of us are unaware of. We're aware of prison being a form of limitation. We're aware of the law of the land being a form of limitation, right? One is limited by his job. I mean, these are more concrete, these are more common we're more familiar with them. So I chose mazal as an example where one is completely in hands of the mazal, unless, as we will see later, he does something to liberate himself from that mazal. Otherwise, we are limited. Even though we've been speaking about free will, how much free will the human being has, and we're going to define that, B'ezrat Hashem, later on, in what areas does he have free will, and what areas does he not have free will, right? So, in a sense, we are free. We do have a tremendous potential to do a lot of things in this world. But on the other hand, we are limited. We're not completely independent to do as we wish. The Torah says, rabbis say that Elecha ben chorin ela misha osek b'Torah. A true free man is only one who studies Torah. Why should they make such a statement? So there's various midrashim that talk about what kind of freedom one gains through the learning of Torah. First of all, the Torah is a map. It gives us a sense of direction. And you know what the benefit of that is? You know where you're going. That's good. A lot of people do not know where they're going. You ask somebody from the street, what are you doing? What is life all about? Why are you alive? Why are you working so hard? They don't really have a clear answer. They don't know where they're headed. The Torah gives you a clear indication, oh, I'm here for a number of years. This is what I need to accomplish. These are therefore my priorities. This is where I'm going to invest my time and money. That's great. I mean, that makes it easier than if you have no clue, no idea of what you need to do. So number one, the Torah is significant in that it shows us the way. And if it shows us the way correctly, that is very much liberating, because you're not tied down to doubts, hesitations. Is this right or this wrong? Well, let's look it up. Let's check the halakha. Let's see what the Torah says. Then we will know. Arguments between husband and wife. That's a form of limitation too. You can't decide. Who should decide? Who's right and who's wrong? How do you know? How do you reconcile differences? You turn to the Torah. So the Torah liberates you, in a sense, in that respect, that it eliminates doubts. It can eliminate the doubts. It can give you a clear sense of direction of where you're headed. The Torah also, by being very specific as to what you can have and what you cannot have, what is important in life and what is not, liberates you from another very, very heavy limitation, and that is the limitation that is imposed on us by materialism. After all, man, because he is always in need, whether it's food, drink, rest, money, that is also a big burden, that is also a limitation, isn't it? Having to have this, I need a car, I need a home. All of these limit one. And the Torah comes along and tells you, you don't have to have the latest car. Why should you have to have the latest car and go in debt, borrow money, become tense about it, fight about it, right? What for? A car that is a couple years old will do just fine. After all you need is a car that gets you to work. But if one is very materialistic, or one is greatly influenced by society, by his friends, so he got himself a new car, I have to have it too. And if he doesn't have the money, he will have to borrow it, put it on his credit card. That's so sad, because he's becoming a slave of this materialism. So is he a free man? Of course he's free. He's not in prison. He's not in Egypt as a slave to Paro, but he's a slave of materialism. One who learns Torah, the Torah liberates him from the materialism, which is a very, very heavy burden on many people who are somehow tied to it. Not everybody is as tied to materialism, but some are very tied to it. You have to have it. The mitzvot that are contained within the Torah offer us also not only guidance, but a way to be merasen, as we say in Hebrew, to control or to discipline our ta'avot, our desires. It is important to eat, but how much should I eat? Until I get an upset stomach? I mean, the body knows more or less when it's full. The body knows. Only after it has eaten, it filled itself up, or if it feels the pain. So the body has a mechanism built in to know the limits. They say fish don't know the limits, and that's why if you overfeed them, they die. So if you have a fish pond, an aquarium, you have to be careful not to overfeed them, because they don't know when to stop. And they die. The human being, Baruch Hashem, approximately knows when to stop. But not always. If it comes to money, does a human being know when to stop? Whoever has 100 wants 200. It's a never-ending game. When it comes to money, when it comes to certain tavot and desires, he's always in pursuit of that. One who has the disease of wanting kavod, honor, he won't be satisfied so easily. He'll feel hurt, pain, insulted if somebody slighted him, if somebody did not give him the kavod, the respect that he thinks he deserves. He's an eved. He's not a free man. I really feel bad for these people who have these problems, right? That they have a certain dependency. We're not even talking about smoking now. That people have asked me, when is Shabbat over? Why are you such in a hurry? You have to go to a movie or something? You have to go to a pizza? I mean, why are you in a hurry to go somewhere? I mean, why do you have to know when Shabbat is over? No, I have to have cigarettes. I have to smoke. I've been waiting since yesterday, since Adlakat Nerot, from Friday, to have my first smoke. They are, in a sense, also slaves of this habit. But that's not the worst. That is not the worst habit, or that is not the worst dependency. There are other habits and other problems that people have a hard time getting rid of. So the purpose of the mitzvot is to discipline us, to show us how much to have of everything, not to overdo certain things, to have the proper measure. Right? Everything Hashem created in the world has a purpose. You can enjoy it as long as you don't overdo it, you don't have too much of it, everything in its right time. That is the whole idea of the mitzvot. Mitzvot are not only intended for us to gain our passport or our ticket to Olam Haba. That's also true. But it's a way to discipline us in this world, to give this life structure and meaning. Because Hashem is not the one who needs the mitzvah. What comes out of the mitzvah, when we put on tefillin, what does he get out of it? He doesn't really need that. Right? The mitzvah, or the performance of a certain mitzvah, brings about a certain to'elet, a certain benefit to us directly, even though we don't see it right now. The to'elet is mainly in the spiritual world, but even in the physical world. Certain mitzvot, for example, like honoring one's parents, makes a lot of sense. It's logical. They're needed. And in the same with other mitzvot, even Shabbat, which is testimony to creation of the world, has a lot of additional benefits other than just testimony. It's a physical rest, a day that we abstain from physical work, which is very important. It allows us to focus on our neshama, because we're slaves for 6 days. That's what we are. The Torah says so. You will sweat to earn a living. Even attorneys sweat to earn a living. I actually feel bad for them. They work 23 hours a day. They barely sleep. They barely see their families. They're sometimes working overtime. And CPAs too, not just attorneys. CPAs during tax season. Who told you to have to prepare everybody's tax return? Just take 100 and say, goodbye, Charlie, must speak. I don't think that you know too many CPAs who would do that. To give up another account, right? It's hard, right? Why give it up? It's more money, more mullah. It's ta'avot. You have to have good discipline to be able to know your limits. A lot of women these days are working very hard. You know what they're doing? They're turning their house upside down. Why? It's Pesach. But wait a minute. Shouldn't the house be clean and organized the whole year? Every day, every Friday, once a week, once every 2 weeks. Clean your home. Dust. You don't have to do it yourself. Hire somebody. Pay them. The house should always be clean. Why do it just once a year? Pesach, you're supposed to be a free man. You're supposed to be liberated. And all of a sudden, all the women are becoming slaves. Really? I feel bad for them. Why work so hard? There's no obligation. There is a mitzvah, of course. We have clear instructions to clean our home for Pesach. But who says you have to dig so much? Only because the house must have been abandoned for so long. I mean, that everybody has to now turn it over, find all the chametz and the dust and all the cobwebs, they call them. Yeah? Spider webs, whatever. Yeah. Well, clean it every week a little bit here. So when it comes to a few days before Pesach, you just have to do a little bit more, that's all. But anyway, there's different kinds of slavery, different kinds of bondage, not just paro. As you can see, people are slaves to their ta'avot, to materialism, to their various midot. In the Torah, when one learns the Torah, it liberates him from all of this slavery because it shows him the way, it shows him the discipline, it gives him the structure, and that is what liberates him. And the mazal, as I mentioned before, but that is a whole separate topic. And B'ezrat Hashem, when we get to the topic of mazal, you will see how being Jewish is very special because we are children of Hashem, and as a result of that, we are able to change our mazal. In something as limiting as a mazal, imagine somebody who has no children according to his mazal. That's very limiting. It's very depressing. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go to all the doctors in the world, but if the mazal does not agree, nothing will help. Now what? Now what do? Nobody has the key. You need a key to get out of this problem. No doctor, no surgeon. You turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are His children. We are able to change that mazal. So the mazal is something that is very limiting. However, we're able to come out of that too, as we will see B'ezrat Hashem after Pesach. The slavery of Egypt was unique. It was unique because it was intended all along to prepare us for Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim, to accept the yoke of heaven. It wasn't a punishment, as many might think. What punishment? Am Yisrael does not even really exist. The brothers of Yosef are going down to Egypt to look for him. Everybody eventually goes down with their family. They stay there. For a while everything is okay. Then they become slaves of Pharaoh. Hard labor. So there are obviously several explanations as to the benefit and purpose of this bondage in Egypt. But the main idea of what Hashem is trying to accomplish is take a people who will eventually be the only ones who will receive the Torah. Not the Samaritans, not the Babylonians, not the Persians, not the Chinese, not the Egyptians. It will be the Jews. These people who did not come from Abraham or Yitzhak, they came from Yaakov. Because Abraham had Yishmael, Yitzhak had Esav. So we're talking about the children of Yaakov, after a number of years of slavery in Egypt, are going to receive the Torah. Why do they need these years of bondage? Because if they would not have had this servitude to Paro, they would have been somewhat independent and not in the mood or not as interested in doing God's will. After all, who is He? I haven't seen Him, that He should tell me what to do. Chas v'shalom. I mean, you need somebody who's used to working, who has been a servant till now. So he has some of the training to serve, and then of course you give him the right teaching and the guidance, and you convince him that you don't have to be the slave of Paro, but you can't be a completely free man to do as you wish either. You need to be the servant of another master, the true master, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yetziat Mitzrayim, therefore, is immediately, after 50 days, is connected to Kabbalat Torah, Hag HaShavuot, because the two are connected. The whole Egypt, the whole slavery, the whole time that we spent there was intended for us to prepare ourselves to receiving the Torah. So the bondage in Egypt was beneficial. It helped us see, through the miracles, of course, that we witnessed in Egypt and later on, it helps us understand that life is about service, but not the service that we had in Egypt, working for a mortal human being, to Paro, working by putting bricks. That's not what life is all about. But some people say, Avodah Hayenu. Life, work is what life is all about. No, it's not. It's just a means to a goal. I need to earn a living, so I work as a mechanic, as a carpenter, as a painter, or as a professional. But is that the tachlit? Is that what I'm here for? Is that what God sent me here for? He created me to work? Regardless of your job, is that what it's for? No, that's just a means to a goal. That's not the goal itself. The goal is Hag HaShavuot, Kabbalat HaTorah. So in other words, here all this work is going on in Egypt. And Hashem says, you know what? You've had enough of it. Now it's time to go to the Tachlit. I've prepared you. You're not ready yet. You need 50 days of purifying yourself because you were immersed in the Tum'ah, in the impurity of Egypt. But you gained what you needed to gain. In other words, you prepared yourself mentally, physically, to receive upon yourself true servitude. What is the true servitude? To do the will of Hashem. He's the real master. He's the one that you will be serving, not Paro and not anybody else. No president, no prime minister. He's the main master whom you need to serve. And by the way, if you serve him properly, as a result of that, you will be rewarded. You know what the reward will be? The immediate reward, not the Olam Haba. The immediate reward will be that you will be masters of your own destiny. What did we say before? That mazal is something which is a very limiting one. But if one does, as Hashem tells him, one observes the Torah, fulfills the mitzvot, then he will become a master of his destiny because he may be able to change it. That is true freedom. Freedom of the Yetzer Hara, freedom of one's bad midot, which he may possess, bad character, freedom from materialism, freedom which allows the neshama to express itself. And once the neshama expresses itself, what happens is it does the will of Hashem. It doesn't do the will of the body. The only way that can happen is if one listens to the Torah, because the Torah is speaking to the neshama, even though it's speaking to the body too. But it's the language of the neshama. The neshama has no problem with this. It is completely compatible with what the neshama wants. It's just that the body gets in the way. That is why the neshama sometimes is also compared to as sitting in the prison of the body. So the neshama is in a sense in a prison too. For 80, 90 years, the prison is called the body, and it liberates itself from time to time on Shabbat. It's able to express itself. Oh, Baruch Hashem, I don't have to work. Now, guess what happens if somebody who observes Shabbat opens up the mail or reads the LA Times? He gets tense all over again. He sees the bad news. He sees that his stock just went down the drain. How is he going to? What kind of a Shabbat do you think he's going to have? You're not supposed to do that. You're ruining your Shabbat. You're continuing to be a slave. Be free for a moment. Think about the good things in life. Be positive. Liberate yourself from all that is holding you down a whole week. Don't think about cars. Don't think about your vacation trips even. Because even that is going to occupy your mind and you're going to be tense. Well, which hotel? 3-star hotel or 4-star hotel? By the beach or inside? In the room, does the room have to have a jacuzzi or not a jacuzzi? Does it have to be approved by the AAA or not? Are they having a sale this coming season or is it off season? Why bother yourself with all these details? It's shtuyot and nonsense. How could you really feel the avirah, the environment of Shabbat, if one is engrossed with all these mundane things? The whole idea of Shabbat is to eliminate all of that for at least 25 hours so you can experience a little bit of ruchaniyut, a little bit of spirituality, which is freedom. The neshama is free, but the neshama is not free if you continue to emphasize the body and not the neshama. So ultimately, the exodus from Egypt is not lehefkerut. It's not to go out to do anything that you want, to freedom as the goyim like to think freedom, to do anything they wish. But ultimately, the exodus of Egypt was intended to immediately receive the Torah, to fulfill the Torah mitzvot. Now, in order to achieve that freedom that one gains by observing the Torah mitzvot, one has to overcome a very important hurdle. Okay, here's the Torah mitzvot. Now what? There's a hurdle. What's the hurdle? The hurdle is that the human being is created in such a way that he could say no. He could easily say no. Why should I do it? What do I get from it? Maybe it's outdated. Maybe there was a committee that put it together. Maybe it's not true. In other words, it's not divine. It's too hard. It doesn't apply anymore. The human being, the mind, can justify many things and can find all sorts of excuses why not to do something. So even though we've just said how beautiful and how important the Torah is, there are a lot of Jews out there, too many Jews, who are not convinced, or who have not tried it, or who do not know about it. And the question is, what's necessary to bring about a change in one's life, in a Jew's life, who for so many years has not had it, has not looked for it, was not given it, regardless of the reason. But what's needed in order to bring about a fulfillment, a basic fulfillment of the Torah mitzvot? What's needed? And the answer is bitul v'hachna'ah. The most important midah that's necessary in order to be able to accept Torah mitzvot is that one is humble. Humility. Bitul or hitbatlut means that one does not think of himself first. One is not self-centered. The moment one adapts this way of thinking, that he does not come first, he is able to listen to what others have to say. In this case, he will be able to listen to what Hashem has to say. Hashem is expecting certain things from him. He's actually telling him what to do, how to run his life. In order for one to be able to do that, he has to have, there's no way out of it, bitul v'hachna'ah. You don't think that this is just important between us and Hashem. In our relationship between a husband and wife, this is also just as important. A man will not do what his wife asks of him. A wife will not do what her husband asks of her, unless there's some degree of bitul and achna'ah. If there's no achna'ah, if there's no humbleness, if there's only self-centeredness, then you're going to want what is best in your interests. Right now you're tired, you're not going to do what she asks of you. Or now she is not in the mood, and she will not do what her husband very much wants of her. Now, we're not talking about that they don't have love. They have love, they care about each other. But that's not enough. There has to be a certain degree of bitul or achna'ah, which means, again, it means I don't come first. I don't consider my interests first. I'm able to compromise. I'm able to give in. I'm able to consider the other person's wishes. Even though it means, when I consider somebody else's wishes, that it goes against my wishes. That's not easy. That's called bitul or achna'ah. In other words, I'm willing to submit to somebody else. And that's not easy. The opposite of bitul and achna'ah is ga'ava, arrogance or self-centeredness. That where a person emphasizes his own interests, his own personal needs. And if they go against the wishes of somebody else, well, that's too bad. He's going to go ahead and take care of his needs first. This is one of the biggest problems in life. Who comes first? Sometimes you can't satisfy the two at the same time. You can't. How do you can't satisfy the two? So one who is smart, one who wants to succeed in life, one who wants to have a successful relationship with his spouse, if that is meaningful to him, if that's important to succeed. A lot of people couldn't care less if they succeed or not. I mean, they say they want to have a good marriage, but they don't do enough. If you really want to succeed in your relationship with your spouse, then you have to know that one of those ingredients is to show bitul and achna'ah. Otherwise it will not work. Because there are many times where the interests go against each other. Do you know that many women like to go to weddings and parties? It's nice. It's a social life. It's a time to dress up. Yeah. A time to look good. A time to be complimented by other women, of course. Yeah. And the man says, oh, I have had a long day. I'm not interested. I just want to sit home, read, listen to some music, and now what do? Says, honey, why don't you go yourself? Most women don't want to go by themselves. They want to go with their husbands. So what do? Anybody have any suggestions? You always do what your wife says? Always? I don't hear any responses. Yeah. Bitul and achna'ah does not mean that you always give in, because what if your spouse asks for something which is not completely kasher? Yeah? I don't want you to have this person over right now. Or I don't want you to give him tzedakah. Or I don't want you, something which is completely acceptable, it's a mitzvah, it's proper. Are you going to listen to her? Because you have bitul and achna'ah? No, you have to know when not to listen. Yeah. Bitul and achna'ah just means that when something is correct, when something is proper, that you consider it, and not just consider your own needs. One's needs do not always come first. When Am Yisrael therefore said Na'aseh v'nishma, that was a very, very significant time, a very significant moment, a very important expression. Na'aseh v'nishma means that they are willing to do just about anything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would ask of them. Na'aseh v'nishma, even that which we do not know, even though that which we do not understand. That was a very significant expression, a very significant declaration. It's like in Arabic you say, alayni wa rasi. In other words, whatever you say to me, I do. That shows complete submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It elevated the Jewish nation very, very much at the moment they said that. It showed, of course, that they were on a high level by being able to say so. It showed that they have become completely purified of the tum'ah, of the Avodah Zarah of Egypt. It shows that they have a healthy mind, that the neshama is the one that's guiding the ship and not the physical body, because the physical body doesn't just say Na'aseh v'nishma to just anybody. Here they were convinced. They heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo b'atzmo. They were there in Matan Torah. They saw the miracles. There was no doubt left in their mind. When you have no doubts, that should be the immediate reaction. So what does this show? This shows that a lot of people, unfortunately, out there, either they have doubts or hesitations, reluctant, or simply are lacking the achna'ah, the necessary achna'ah to be able to overcome this big hurdle. And what's this big hurdle? That he should tell me how to run my life. Kadosh Baruch Hu, I don't see him, they say. Or they say it's too late, I'm already too old. Whatever, everybody has a different Yetzirah that speaks differently to him. Regardless, it's a big hurdle. Achna'ah, therefore, is such an important midah, which you're not born with it, you have to acquire it. And one, of course, who's convinced, he better be nichna, he better submit himself, otherwise he's a rasha. I mean, you've heard it, you've seen it, and you still don't want it. Right? But the Yetzirah, of course, finds all sorts of ways of why not to submit, of why not to give in. Okay, she had her way yesterday. Today I'm going to have my way. How's that? Is that right? No. What book are you following that says that? When she had her way yesterday, you have your way today. By the way, there may be some book in psychology that may recommend this kind of approach. Why don't you decide that on Sundays the husband is right and on Mondays the wife is right? There might be, just to make peace in the home, but that's not achna'ah. That's not the correct way. Achna'ah means that you don't consider your interests first, and that you consider, or you take into consideration what the other one has to say fairly. You give it a fair, chance, and if it's possible, you do it. Yeah. So, what happens right before Pesach, in order for us to be completely nichna, we remove this hurdle. This hurdle is called chametz. Chametz is burnt and removed from our households because chametz rises, right? It represents the gava. It's what's holding us back from receiving Torah mitzvot. It's what's holding us back from being completely free. So we burn the chametz. in all of this in preparation for Chag HaShavuot, right? Everything is in preparation to be able to receive Torah mitzvot. Now, this idea of burning the chametz produces an additional, very important result. When you burn the chametz, when you remove the ga'ava, when you don't think about yourself, and you don't emphasize that which is the physical, you know what you gain? You gain the ability to appreciate all the miracles that Kadosh Baruch Hu has done for us, in realizing that they're all Yad Hashem. And let me tell you how that happens. If one does not remove the ga'ava, if one has, as you call it in English, he has an attitude, right? He's arrogant, he's self-centered, he thinks about himself. If you point out a miracle to him, you know how he will react? One possible scenario, one possible reaction, it's just a coincidence. It happens every so often that the tide was low, and that is when Moshe, took out Am Yisrael. The tide was low tide. That is when it wasn't that the water split, right? When one has ga'ava, meaning that he does not want to receive, does not want to accept. So how do you deal with a miracle? But a miracle, look at this, it's a miracle. Hashem, you see? No, it's nature. Why say something like that? Because of the ga'ava. He cannot, because if he would not have the ga'ava, you know what would happen? He would break. He would submit. He would say yes. All the big scientists who are atheists, who believe strongly in evolution, either they're not so smart, either that, or they're completely, what would be the right word for it? Completely against, or completely object to any notion that there is a creator, because that would go against their personal wishes, their desires. In other words, they know that the moment that they admit that there is a creator, that everything is not from a big bang and from evolution, that means they can't do anything they want, yesh din v'yesh dayan, and they're afraid of that. So they ignore it, they do away with it, they espouse different theories and different ideas. And the reason I say scientists is because they're supposed to be smart. They see cells underneath powerful microscopes, and they see the beautiful life and the incredible creation up close more than anybody else. And if anybody can see the creator, it's them. It's them. Remember the Hartumim Mitzrayim, the Egyptian magicians, Makat Kinim, when there was lice, what did they say? Etzba Elohim. This is the finger of Hashem. This is the hand of Hashem. They were the ones who said so, not anybody else. They who knew what is done by demons, what is witchcraft, and what cannot be done by witchcraft. It has to be Hashem did it. They were the ones to admit it. When Hashem had all these miracles performed in Egypt, commentators explain the reason why he chose Egypt is because that's where all the magic and the witchcraft is. And if the Egyptians are going to admit that there is a God, then the whole world will follow. Because if they know that this is God, then everybody else would, of course, agree. Because everybody can say, oh, Moshe was a magician. He pulled a trick. No, the Egyptians admit it too. So, one who has a gava problem, of course, will not want to deal with this, will not want to accept this. And therefore, any miracle that he sees, what will he say? It's a mikre. And during the holidays, we put an emphasis on miracles. And there's various reasons for that. One reason being that we want to remember the past. We want to remind our children that what happened in the past happens in the present and will happen in the future. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. He didn't just abandon the ship. He created the world and just left us alone. He's still around. He's guiding us all along. All the lessons that are supposed to be learned, one of them is the lesson of Rashgacha, that Hashem is guiding us. He's protecting us. So therefore there's an emphasis on the miracles, because who performs miracles if not Hashem? Nature? So you see how it's important to emphasize the miracles, and if one has ga'ava, if one is not nichna, if one is not submissive, is not humble, then he will attribute everything to chance. Imagine On Pesach, a lot of people every year they ask me, Rabbi, is it true that I can't have a goy for the Seder? I said, yes. Is it asur? It's not exactly asur. The real prohibition is for the goy to eat from the Korban Pesach. But we apply that to the Seder too. A non-Jew or a Jew who's a non-believer, a complete non-believer, cannot be at the Seder. Why? Imagine you talking about the Seder, the miracles. Comes along this guy that you invited, you were kind, and tells your child, come on, don't believe that, that's fairy tales. That's Baba Mises, like they say in Yiddish. You believe that? That couldn't be true. That's what they're telling you. Come on. You want that to happen on your Seder table? That everything is being cooled off instead of warmed up? Instead of encouraging the children, instead of imbuing them with the right hashkafa? Comes along this guy who doesn't believe and throws cold water on it. That's Amalek. Pesach is not invited. You shouldn't even have him for Shabbat either. But Pesach? No way.
What happens if you invite him and you don't know that he's going to do that? So I mean, the middle of the Seder.
Well, if you don't know, then that's why we have in the Haggadah Arba'a Banim. In the Haggadah we have 4 sons, right? Hacham, Rasha, Tam, V'Shanei Yedei Lishor. Hacham is the wise, the child, or the man, the Jew. Rasha, the wicked, the not believer. The Tam, the simpleton. And the most dangerous one of all, Shenoi Yedei Lishor. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't know how to ask. He doesn't know that's important to ask. You know when he asks? When he goes to meditate in the Himalaya mountains in Kathmandu over there somewhere, and he finds out from the guru that all that the guru knows is from us, from the Jews, from the Torah. Go back to Israel, my boy. What are you doing here? Yeah, he finally asks questions, but in the wrong place. So these children who are gathered at the table as children, or as adults, or as guests, you have to be prepared to deal with them and to answer their questions. Yeah, he was that.
I was going to bring up the time.
Yes.
How do you have cure if you can't bring people like that to your house?
Cure is one who's already shown an interest. You're not going to take somebody off the street when you don't know what his background is or what his intentions are, especially for Seder. You can bring him to the shul because there may be a battle. You don't want to battle at the Seder night at the either.
What about for Shabbos?
You have to know a little bit about him. A little bit. Shabbat is less of a problem, but the only problem that you may have Shabbat is that he may drive to you in Shabbat, and that's no good either.
Better than having him drive to the basketball court.
Don't they say in English, 2 rights don't make a wrong? Something like that? 2 wrongs don't make a right? What is that? Yeah. So just because he's going to do wrong, so therefore I'm going to do it this way, I mean, no.
But
Yes.
The Russian is part of the 4 sons.
Right.
So you can't just eliminate him.
If he's your son. You cannot eliminate your son. You have your son in the table, and if that son is rebellious, you got to speak to him too. You have to have a different approach to a son who's a rasha, a son who's rebellious. And there are children like that, who do not want to do exactly as they're told. But let's talk about your children, not somebody else.
But a Talmud is sort of like a son.
What is that?
A Talmud.
A Talmud, a student? Yeah.
Sort of like a son. So
Of course, if you have a long relationship, as long as you don't have children your own around the table, you don't want to deal with that. Unless you're prepared. If you're prepared to give a whole lecture to this rasha at your table, that may be different. Something good may come out of that, yes.
What if you have Baal Tshuva people who have non-observant parents or non-observant relatives? They can't come for Shabbos or for Pesach.
As long as they're not anti,
Wasn't it anti?
yeah, as long as they're not anti, they're not going to ruin the spirit.
So you're referring to anti as opposed to ambivalent.
Exactly, yeah. People who are going to ruin, who have the potential of ruining the table, ruining the whole atmosphere, going against the whole purpose of what the Seder represents. So anyway, so that's the significance of the Bi'ur Hametz, eliminating the Gava. Yeah. So anyway, it's only by eliminating the Gava that one will come to appreciate that all the miracles are performed by Hashem, and not Kohi ve'otzim yadi, the Israeli army, the smart, intelligent prime minister or the air force or the weaponry that was used. Because again, people can attribute success to all sorts of things that happen and to chance other than to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is a time to contemplate everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done. And one who has ga'ava or who has no achna'ah will have a hard time. So this is the biggest hurdle, and that is why we eliminate the chametz, which is symbolic of the ga'ava. This happens, we could eliminate, somebody asked me, well, why don't we just eliminate it the whole year and not eat bread at all? It's symbolic, of course, of Passover. It's not something which is asur. Bread is mutar. It's symbolic. It's not that it's unhealthy here. For Pesach, this is what we do. We eliminate it completely. Pesach contains so many important messages. It's the first holiday. We get rid of the chametz. Big hurdle in order to be able to truly accept all Malchut Shamayim, Haggadah Shavuot, and attribute all the miracles that we want to talk about to Hashem and not to anybody else. This holiday also, there's an emphasis of Chinuch HaYeladim, V'yiganta lebincha, teaching one's children, giving over to them the Masoret, the tradition. And of course, if the father is not a good example, then how is he going to give it over to the children? So the best chinuch, the best education is being a good example. The giving over of the tradition is significant because that's the survival of the Jewish nation that depends on us, not on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made it that we survive physically in this world in a different way, in a physical way in a sense. But spiritually, it's up to us. It's up to us. If we give it over to our children, if we educate them, if we show them the way. So that's the survival of the Jewish nation is also emphasized in Pesach in two ways. One, through the spiritual way, that we as parents are responsible to educate the children, to give over to them, to tell them the story. And the second way is when we talk about the survival of the Jewish nation throughout history, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been watching over us, which we'll talk about soon. There's an emphasis on having children stay up at night during the Seder and dealing with them and explaining to them everything, because in Judaism there is a very important connection between the father and the son. The son is, after all, the continuation, and as much as we can exert influence over them, we need to. We need to invest in their education, we need to provide for them the best teachers. There is a big emphasis on that. The reason why I mention this is because in this country especially, a lot of parents, after the child reaches 16 or 17, they tell me, why don't you go fetch yourself an apartment and learn to be a man. They throw him out of the house. Children, or they leave on their own. They don't want to be in their parents' home. Whereas in Latin America, kids stay with their parents until they're married. There's no such thing as leaving their home and renting a place. Unless you're in some college far away in a dormitory, you have no choice. In this country, not everyone, but many, I'm talking about even amongst the Jews, they have developed this idea that the child should just leave their home, either because they want their privacy, as one parent told me, I just want my privacy, I don't want him around. He's your son. He's your son. He's always going to be your son. I mean, in the Syrian community of Haleb, of the Halebis or Damascus in Mexico, for example, kids continue to come to their parents for Shabbat and for the holidays years into their marriage. One Shabbat is by the parents, one Shabbat is by the in-laws, and once in a while you make Shabbat by yourself too. If you have a large family, too many kids, you just can't easily go, because the parents have to have many children come to them too. So, you split up the Shabbatot, but there's a lot of unity. There's always the family unit that is continuously strengthened, and there's a continuous emphasis on spending time together, and especially during holidays, Shabbatot, where there's so much to talk about. This is the way to do it. The celebration of the holiday is also a time to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're not an ungrateful nation. We're not an ungrateful people. We admit, we recognize a good that was done to us, and that is also very important in educating one's child, is to have him learn this important characteristic of saying thank you to somebody who has done something good to you. So during the holiday of Pesach, or any holiday, we say v'samachta b'chagecha, you should rejoice. How do you rejoice? Not just by drinking schnapps or by having good food. You rejoice by giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by being truly happy for everything that He has done for you, even if you are poor. But He has done for you or for your parents, for all of Jewry. And by making others happy. True happiness cannot come about when one by himself is happy. It's only by making others who are not as lucky, by making them happy too. The poor, the orphans, the widows, by inviting them over. So there's an emphasis on having guests during the holidays even more than on Shabbat. Because happiness is not something that's left for one by himself. True happiness is something that is shared with others. And when you're truly happy and sharing the happiness with others, you give thanks to the source of the happiness, to the source of all the blessing, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, the emphasis here is educational, so as not to claim, well, it's because of my PhD that I'm doing so well, it's because of this, it's because of that. It's not by chance, it's not mazal, it's everything is Me'ashamayim, everything is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like all the miracles, the fact that we are here today, the fact that we are alive today, everything is Me'ashamayim. All of this chinuch going on the table. That's why a lot of people said it lasts till 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Because they really talk about good things. They really talk about valuable concepts of Judaism. And that is how Judaism is strengthened. At moments as these, on Shabbatot, when you talk about Torah, not when you talk about money and gashmiut, materialism. During the time we had a Bet HaMikdash, there was another form of celebration which came about as a result of going up la regel, aliyah la regel, 3 times a year. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And then there was a Korban. People who were living, let's say, in Tveria were impressed by the Bet HaMikdash. They haven't seen for a while. They saw the service, they saw the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol. It was something it was something very inspiring. Today that we don't have that, we have the Haggadah, Haggadah Shel Pesach, which, what does it do for us? When we read it, I'm assuming we understand what we're saying, we will reflect upon everything that has happened to us, everything that we've gone through, the history, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu has saved us from our enemies. And that in itself will be very inspiring. Because what we say in the Haggadah is, B'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation they get up to destroy us. V'kadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam. Right? When we say V'hisha amda. So in one part of the Haggadah we emphasize the physical survival of the Jewish people in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That has happened. It could not have happened without Him. That has been continuous Hashgacha Pratit at all times, Divine Providence. I always like to mention what Goyim themselves have observed, not only the Jews. Goyim themselves have observed by looking at the history of the Jewish people, and one of them is Mark Twain. When he visited Israel and he saw how desolate the land was, how it was like mourning for its children. And this is what he wrote, I think in 1899. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed, the Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? The question that the Goy, Mark Twain, asks. At least he was honest. No gava. In order to reach this conclusion, he admits that it's a mystery. He just doesn't know the answer. You know what the answer is? There was once a Roman who asked big Rabbi, one sheep among 70 wolves? How does she survive? It must be she's a strong sheep. He says, no, you got it all wrong. It's the shepherd. It's not the sheep. The shepherd who watches over the sheep. And that's the answer to Mark Twain. It's not the Jew, the genius of the Jew. Are we smart? I mean, yes, Baruch Hashem, we have a good head. We have beracha. But how do we survive? It's against all the odds. they've all come out against us. So many times they tried to wipe us out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has saved us all the time. And that is why we also emphasize Baruch Shomer Avtachato. We also emphasize another important part of another part of the Haggadah. Baruch Shomer Avtachato is that blessed be he who guards his promise. Because Hashem has made promises to us that He will redeem us in the future too. Okay, we've come out of Egypt, but we're back in misery. In some, depending where you are, we're still in Galut, in a very long Galut, in a longer Galut than in Egypt, in a lot of Tum'ah. So what now? So Baruch Shomer Avtachato, we're thankful to Kadosh Baruch Hu for, of course, for having protected us all along, but also we trust in Him that He will bring about very, very soon the real Geulah that all of us have been looking forward to, and that is with Mashiach. That, of course, will come about in stages, just like this Geulah of Mitzrayim came about in stages, which is why we have 4 cups of wine. Arba Leshonot Shel Geulah, right? V'otzeti, v'ga'alti, v'itzalti, v'lakachti. There's a 5th cup of wine, Kosher Elyahu, v'veti. I will bring you to the land. Even though we were already brought to the land, but we left several times. We were kicked out. But the next time, Bezat Hashem, we come, it will be a permanent aliyah. We will not just go there to be exiled again. It will be a permanent aliyah. And of course, all of this comes about during the Seder night, during the 7 or 8 days of Pesach, which we commemorate. The first part being the Exodus of Egypt, and the last part, Shvi'i Shel Pesach, which is the crossing of the Red Sea, which represents another part of the miracle, but nevertheless, all in preparation for Chag HaShavuot. So, even though we're very happy to celebrate the Chag HaPesach for what it represents, we should not forget that the message, part of the message really is that this is all in preparation for Matan Torah. We will not just let go out of Egypt to be free men, like some want to say, Liot Am Chofshi Be'artzenu. They want to be free men. No, that's not what it's all about. Judaism is not about being free to do anything you want. It is about serving the real master and not the wrong master. And one who does not have the Torah, he's a slave of his Yetzer Hara, which is like Paro, making him work long hours, making him a slave of Gashmiut, of materialism. And without the Torah, all of this freedom is not true freedom. So B'ezrat Hashem, next week when we celebrate the Hag, together with our families, let us remember the message of Pesach is that true freedom means accepting all Torah and mitzvot.